and welcome to another episode of Boundless Body Radio. I'm your host, Casey Ruff, and today we have another amazing guest to introduce to you now. Dr. William Jackson is a clinical health psychologist in private practice and a former Buddhist monk. Dr. Jackson has over 20 years of experience in mindfulness based meditation and a passion for comprehensive well-being. He is focused on developing systems to aid individuals in clarifying and realizing a personalized vision of well-being. William incorporates the most accessible and core methods from several unique and evidence-based meditation practices to his wide network of health and wellness practitioners, including experts in yoga, nutrition, and holistic care. In addition, Dr. Jackson has researched and trained in clinical applications of meditation, including the Relaxation Response program developed at the Benson-Henry Institute of Mind-Body Medicine, Mindfulness Based Cognitive Therapy, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, and Mindfulness Training for the Primary Care Clinician. He is the founder of SkillfulMeans and creator of the online meditation program, the SkillfulMeans Program. Dr. William Jackson, what an honor it is to welcome you to Boundless Body Radio.
Thanks. Thank you for having me. This is great.
Absolutely. The first and most obvious question I have for you is why? Why did you come back from being a Buddhist monk?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was actually, it was both, a wonderful insight and somewhat unfortunate. I actually had the realization while I was in a retreat in Burma. So I was surrounded by, beautiful nature and this, huge Sema hall, which is like the meditation hall. And I had all these monks around me who were, meditating. I was surrounded by the jungle and really beautiful. And I'd been there for, 3 or 4 months at that point, doing 10, 14 hours of meditation a day, really intensive. And I was going for it. I'm like, I'm going to be enlightened, And as I was sitting there, I had this realization that, one part that as I was meditating, my mind was changing. I realized that over the years of practicing, I was really becoming a different person and was really more focused on my own well-being and creating a healthier mind. And then I realized, I thought about my family and I thought about my friends and all the other people that I know who, are creating more well-being in their life and the different paths that they're taking and how it's not maybe quite as focused. And I was like, I want to help other people to do that. And within that sort of moment of realization, I realized that part of me wants to be back. I want to be around the people who I grew up with. And ultimately, as a human being, and I was like 26, 27 at this point, in my life, being a human being, I want to have the experience of having children, having a family. And I want to share what I've learned, in the forest with people that I care about and I grew up with and that I love. And to do that, I felt like I really had to go back to school. So I was like sitting in this beautiful place and peaceful, meditating. I had not a care in the world. And then I was like, shit. Now I have to go back, take the robes off, go back to school and start on this whole new journey. Because if I'm going to be honest with myself, if I'm going to be authentic, and if I'm going to have integrity, this is a deep realization. This is my own truth. So that's sort of why I came back.
Wow. Well, in Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey, the end is not, the slaying of the dragon. The end is the return. In Star Wars or the Lord of the Rings or basically any story that we tell, there has to be a return with, a knowledge or, something that can be shared around with the rest of the community. So I think it's torch. Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I think it's wonderful that you did return and we're glad you're here to tell your story. We should probably back up and talk about, your upbringing and your childhood. I don't think many people get super deep into meditation the way that you did without having something that really kind of shook you up. Was that the case for you?
Yeah. I mean, I grew up, I was like, I'm a white suburban, white male, grew up in suburbia, like literally white picket fences. And, I was into watching Kung Fu and sort of Asian tradition type stuff. So I was always, I did martial arts. I thought all of that was really cool. But it was really my sister she was kind of a rebel. She was the middle child. And I kind of took after her. I thought she was really cool. And she went away to watch these people's children in Hawaii at this retreat center, this spiritual retreat center. And she used to have this long blonde, sort of beautiful hair. And she came home, and when my mother opened the door, she had shaved her head. And my mother was like, and I thought, cool. And at that point, I said, she just looked different. She used to be such a rebel and like, experimenting with different, sort of things and maybe not taking the best care of herself. But when I saw her at the door, I was like, wow, she looks like really healthy. She looks different. She looks clear. Like I said, well, what did you do? And she said, oh, I practiced Vipassana. I'm like, what's that? She's like, oh, well, you sit and you focus on your breath and you go really deep into your mind. And I thought, awesome, that sounds great. So I, sat down and I started practicing meditation. This is when I was like 15.
Wow.
And it just so happens I went to school with John Kabat-Zinn's daughter and at this performing arts high school when I was in high school. And he was meeting with the Dalai Lama, and I just got known for somebody who was really interested in this sort of thing. I just kept pursuing it. I just had a penchant for it. I can go on and tell you my whole story of how I got into it, but that's sort of where it started with my sister, really, and sort of that rebel mentality of going against the stream.
Wow. That's super cool. When did it start to form in your head that you wanted to actually, become a monk? Like, did that develop slowly over time? Did you do school first? I know you returned back to school after you came back from being a monk, but how did that start to develop?
Well, in high school, again, taking after my sister a little bit, I was also a little bit of a troublemaker, maybe a lot of bit of a troublemaker. I was never mean, but I got into my fair share of trouble. And at one point, I was hanging out with one of my teachers who, at that point, I was selling pot to as a maybe sophomore in high school.
Wow.
And we were, smoking a joint with this teacher which is, just a horrible situation.
That's amazing. That's so cool.
Situation. And he says to me, he said, this acting thing that you do, you really have something. I think it's really, you should really focus on that, because he knew I wasn't doing well academically. I wasn't doing well with other stuff. I had my own like anxiety issues and probably depression at that point. And I was like self-medicating as a 15-year-old. And he said, you should really focus on that. And so I did. And I had all these characters that I would do. People in my high school knew the characters that I did. They didn't even know my name. They were like, oh, that's the kid that does the character. And so that got me into, eventually I realized, I was getting into the wrong crowd. I asked my parents if I could go to this performing arts high school. I was fortunate enough that they could, just barely afford, with scholarships and everything to get me into that. And I got in, I auditioned, and then that took me to the next step, which I auditioned for college, and I got a scholarship to go to college. And while I was in college, I started, actor training. They like, you explore your body and your voice and, all this sort of stuff. And I started practicing meditation. And I was in, to be more present with my scene partner. And I was in Birmingham, England, studying Shakespeare. And there happened to be a book in this, we were actually staying in a Christian missionary, learning from Shakespeare teachers. And there was a book by the Dalai Lama, and it was called How to Practice, The Way to a Meaningful Life. So that sounds cool. I got a lot of time on my hands. So I sat and read and said, if you practice 30 minutes a day, X number of days a week, you can develop, over 3 months, you can develop calm abiding. I was like, well, I have 3 months. Like, why not? He said, and enlightenment is when what you want to do and what's good for you and other people become the same thing. I thought, wow, that's pretty clear. I can buy into that. I don't have to believe that much and just focus on your breath. It's simple enough. I sat down and I did it. I started having all these like magical experiences. And just by focusing on the sensation of breathing, I started to experience my emotions in a different way. I started to experience my mind in a different way. I started seeing lights in my meditation, which for advanced meditators, it's something that commonly happens. It's called nimitta. And I didn't realize that until I got into advanced meditation training, but sort of like beginner's luck thing. And when I came back from practicing all that meditation, there was a monk at my school. And my friend said, And when I was younger, while I was experimenting with mushrooms as a teenager, I had this experience, this like sort of realization that if I screw everything up, because that's how I really felt at the time. I felt I was pretty close to screwing everything up in my life as a teenager. If I screw everything up, I can just go be a monk on a hill. That's what I used to tell myself. And I met this monk. And actually, I had asked a friend to ask him, like, what's the last thing you let go of before enlightenment? And my friend came back to me and said, he said to me, you don't have to wait until everything goes wrong to be a monk on a hill. And I said, what? So I was like, okay, I have to meet this guy. So I went and met him. He had all these, he taught all these cool lessons and everything. It was this good experience. And then I asked if I could go to his monastery to do a meditation retreat. And he said, oh, no, you can't become a monk that easy. I said, oh, I don't want to become a monk. I just want to do a retreat. Then I'm going to go audition in New York and LA after I graduate. He said, okay, fine. So I went to his monastery 2, 3 months, 5 months, and shaved my head and put on a robe.
Wow.
So I got into it.
That's so crazy. That's amazing. We were fortunate enough recently to interview Andrew Jordan Nance. He lives in San Francisco. He writes children's books and works with children to work on meditation and work on mindfulness. He wrote the book Puppy Mind, which is incredible. And he was also an actor. And he told us that he kind of discovered that mindfulness and acting really went hand in hand. And a lot of the activities that he was doing acting were helping him with his mindfulness. I'm just curious. I have to know, like, did you notice the same thing? Was your acting improving as you were doing more mindful training?
Oh yeah. I mean, mindfulness is about developing sort of inner sight. You're getting to know your body. You're getting to know your feelings in a less judgmental and more accepting way. So you're actually able to see what you're feeling. You're able to see how you feel about something and what's going on in your own mind. Usually it's just, we just have so many things that are happening. It's like cell phones, somebody talks to us, we're distracted, we're driving, our kids are yelling at us. We have so many things happening that we can't actually see what's going on internally. And for acting, these are people who are continually looking at why are people acting the way that they're acting? What is actually motivating their behavior? And they're trying to sort of reproduce that and understand how people work. That's what was exciting to me about acting. People like read all these books on acting and they knew all these, actors and plays and whatever. Like I didn't know one play from the next or whatever. I just liked that exploration of the human being. And so when I started meditating, I started to understand emotion so much better. And, I did really well when I was acting. I loved it. And it was, they were very complimentary for sure.
Wow. Interesting answer. I love that. So eventually you ended up back east. You were back. What country did you end up in?
So I was in, for the most part, one of my first monasteries was in Germany, but then I ended up going to Myanmar for my retreats and deeper meditation practice. And then I lived for some time in Sri Lanka as well.
Gotcha. Did you know that you were going to stay there for a set amount of time, or was it kind of indefinite, or maybe for the rest of your life?
Yeah, I think when people asked me that question, I continually respond with, this is going well for now. I didn't make any grand plans, other than I was, dead set on enlightenment when I was, a younger monk. I think that was really ambitious, so to speak. And I wanted to learn about myself, and I just kept practicing and things kept getting better and I kept understanding myself more and I felt like a better and better person because I think I'd really developed a complex that I was a bad person when I was younger and got in all this trouble. And as I meditated, I realized that I had something to offer other people. I had something I could offer them understanding about how emotions worked in the body. Like, what's the arc of anxiety? How do you deal with it? What do you do when you feel really sad? What's it like to truly accept something? What's the process of that? What are the exercises you can practice to get closer? So that, and I would see it in other people's eyes that they felt that was good. They felt that was something valuable. And, that got my number.
Wow. So I'm sure you had like a preconceived notion of what it was going to be like. What were some things that were different than you had expected when you got over there?
Oh, I mean, a couple of things. So my first monastery, I was picturing this like, maybe it would be a temple in the snow, and it would be peaceful, and there'd be Japanese trees everywhere, and like koi ponds with, giant giant koi fish in it. And when I showed up at my first monastery, it was like on a main street, on this main, like almost a highway, and it was an old print factory that just looked all run down. And I thought, oh no. Um, but then when I went inside, there's a community there, and people were really practicing. And for a while, I really loved that place. That was one thing. When I went to Burma, man, you living in a hut, you until you live in a kuti, which is a hut in the woods. Even for a lot of people, that's not even roughing it there. But for me, growing up in white picket fences, we had like a community indoor pool where I grew up. So this was like moving from that to having, after 1 month, I knew the difference between a mosquito bite, a tick bite, a cockroach licking me, an ant bite. I could tell the difference between them, or a flea bite. That was a huge awakening for me of what, the majority of people on this planet go through just to wash. I would fight a lizard to get my water to wash my clothes by hand.
Wow.
So I think that experience, beyond the meditation, just having that experience of like, oh, it takes all day to take care of myself, rather than, oh, I just go to the grocery store and get food, and I put my clothes in the washing machine, or I have somebody else do it for me, and somebody comes and cleans my house. Like, I swept my kuti. I had to sleep in a net. I slept on a wooden bed. I went and I begged for my food every day. I walked barefoot until my feet were bleeding, and then I meditated 10, 14 hours a day to like calm my mind. That was a completely different way of living. And then when I was there, I ended up getting typhoid, because I got typhoid in a cyclone. So in 2009, a cyclone Nargis hit Myanmar, and I was in my like fifth month of retreat. And at that time, I had never been through a rainy season in Myanmar or in South Asia. I had no idea what that was like. And everybody's like, oh, it rains really hard. I thought, okay. I brought an umbrella. And when I took my umbrella out the first day it rained, all the other monks started laughing at me. I was like, why are they laughing? But I realized is that within 5 minutes, my umbrella had completely broke because it was raining so hard. Water was up, mid-calf, just because it was raining so hard. And it doesn't rain like that in the Northeast. I'm from Boston. And then, and then I had to go visit the umbrella monk. That's a whole other story. But, then when the cyclone hit, I'm living in a hut. There's no TV. There's no radio. Nobody to tell you, hey, there's a cyclone, category 5 cyclone, hurricane coming.
Oh, man.
And so I'm sitting in a hut in the middle of the jungle, and all of a sudden it starts raining like really hard. I'm like, wow, boy, it really rains hard in rainy season. And then there's basically a river under my kuti. I'm like, oh, this is why the kuti is up on stilts. and it's literally a river underneath. And then the wind started blowing really hard, and the shutters blew clean off of the kuti. And I thought, maybe something's up, And I just tried to go to bed. I had no idea. And then little did I know, the countryside was wrecked. 130,000 people died. And
wow.
our water system got contaminated, and I got typhoid.
Wow.
And then I had to go to a hospital in Myanmar. And, I have a special place in my heart for Myanmar, like dearly love it, but don't ever go to a hospital in Myanmar. It's a disaster. It's really scary.
I'll keep that in mind. When was the last time you complained about your Wi-Fi going out or something? Do you have to remind yourself of some of the experiences you've had when you start to, have a first world problem or something?
Yeah. I mean, of course, I still Verizon, I pay for this. I still have those like, entitled sort of things that pop up in my mind, but I do think that it's in perspective, and that I know that I can be happy with nothing. Like I really had a robe and a bowl for a while, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I was happy. And I remember this one time I was begging for my food, and this guy who was a real forest monk. So I was like living it up in my kuti that was like filled with ants and, sleeping on a wooden bed. Like that was like, the nice place to live. He literally lived in the woods and sat under a tree. And I remember looking at him and seeing his robe that was made out of rags wrapped around him, and looking at his face. The first thing that came to my mind as I saw like his clean, clear complexion and peacefulness, I thought freedom. And that really stuck with me. And when I think about all of my things and my computer and my house and like all my nice stuff and my, king size bed, whatever, I think there really is, something to some of the things that Thoreau wrote about how these things start to own you and how in some ways it can be a trap. And you just feel beholden to keeping up all the stuff and getting all the stuff, and you get caught in that. I think there's some truth to that. And I don't think that leads to happiness. I think it can often lead to ambition and recklessness and a general unsatisfactory feeling with life and not having enough. Mm-hmm. You're never going to have enough. Mm. So, I think it helps to keep things in perspective a little bit.
Yeah, I love that. Man, I try to talk about that word as much as possible. It's so perplexing to me, the word enough. You're right, man. Like that. When we started earlier this year, just kind of looking at all the things that we had around the house and like, holy smokes, why do I have so many t-shirts? Like there's not 10 of me to wear 10 t-shirts today. Like I have a few that I really love. Why don't I Marie Kondo the rest of this stuff and get rid of it? And I remember I was talking to my dad about it recently and telling him like how few possessions I have. And I went around the house and took pictures of, the few clothes that I still have. And I can't believe how many there still are. Like they do own you, and you do feel a sense of freedom when you start to get rid of those things. I couldn't agree more. I think that's such a wise observation. I would love to ask you, what was your favorite part about being over there?
I mean, I think it's the simplicity of it. You get up, you beg for your food, you sit in meditation, you get to sit with nature, and ultimately, just having the space and time to meditate. I have 2 kids, I run 2 businesses, I have a lot of stuff that I'm doing on a regular basis. And when I don't get my hour of meditation in a day, I get cranky. And I think having the space to sit and the sense of community is very different than in the United States. There's a sense of community. There's a sense of responsibility for those people in your community. This is even in India or Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, when you have lunch, the extra food, usually there's people that are walking by on the street that are poor, and you just have extra food ready to give to people for their lunch. There's this responsibility, which is such a beautiful thing. And when I was in the hospital in Myanmar, they don't have food. So here I am sort of alone, and people just brought me food. Some strange lady whose husband was like dying next to me, she'd come over and she'd rub my feet and sing to me every day. I'd never met this woman. She'd just sing and sing and sing, and she'd laugh, and she'd massage my legs and my feet, and she'd touch my face. Like she loved me, And it was such a beautiful thing that, if it was in the United States, I'd be like, oh, who is this person touching me? I'm going to report this, and I think, we lose something without that community and the sort of messy boundaries sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. If you lived through 2020 here in America, you know all about that. Wow,
Yeah,
that's really
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. I think we could all do a better job of finding our communities, whether it's, meditation groups or even just, the people on our
Mhm.
street, the people that we do life with, was, somewhat of a
Yeah.
shared fate together, and we could do a better job being more open and sharing with the people that are close to us. So I'm really glad
Yeah.
that you shared that story. That's so beautiful. Wow.
Yeah.
So you're over there 6 years, I believe, and have the
Mhm.
realization that you need to return home. What was that process like, and how was it integrating back into Western society?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was culture shock going one way, going into this sort of Asian tradition, learning all the different, languages, the chanting, even just the cultural norms. And then, because just as a small thing in the United States, to be respectful to somebody, you stand up, you look them in the eye, you shake their hand, whatever. That's being respectful. In some Asian cultures, if you stand and you look somebody in the eye, that's really disrespectful, especially of like a spiritual teacher, right? So I didn't understand why everybody, thought I was so rude, initially. Like this, I was often like the one white monk in different situations. So I had to learn all those different things, the different cultural norms, and then coming back into the US, I remember being in school for, psychology as getting my doctorate. And I was very open about, oh yeah, I feel anxiety sometimes. And, when I came back from Burma, I had panic attacks because I almost died in a typhoon and like all this sort of stuff. And I was very open about all that. And I realized that I just had this sense of like safety. Like I'd been around people who were very accepting for a long time. Buddhist monks, and they were always like, they hug you and they're accepting of whatever you say. And it was very open. I thought it was such a beautiful thing. And then I came back and here I am in school for psychotherapy, and everybody like they don't tell you how they're feeling. They won't share any sort of diagnoses they might have. And it was this very careful sort of mistrustful sort of experience that compared to the situation that I was in. And so even now when I think of psychotherapy and the way that I approach things, I think of psychotherapy fitting within the world of mindfulness. For me, the world of mindfulness and meditation is larger. So meditation for me is just any way to train your mind. If you train your mind purposefully to move towards well-being, that's meditation. And there are skillful ways to do that. There are more intense ways to do that. Um, and um, and so psychotherapy fits within that realm. Psychotherapy is just what's called skillful means in that realm, rather than with a lot of therapists who get their doctorate and they understand the mind first from the Western perspective. They feel like mindfulness is this neat little thing that fits into relaxation, and so that sort of cultural clash for me when I came back of openness, of community, of sort of acceptance of the clinical approach versus like a wisdom tradition sort of community approach to things was very different. And then dating apps, going from being in the jungle to like I found my wife on OkCupid.
Wow.
So it was like that was really different. I remember going on a date for the first time, one of my first dates, and I remember it was so different for me because at this point I knew I'm happy alone. I could survive fine and be happy alone, but I want to try it out. So, with full knowledge that it's unlikely going to work out this first date, I can sort of bare my soul and give it my all, and be okay with failure, which was something that was totally different for me. And that was a beautiful gem that I got from sort of the practice as well. So there's a lot of different pieces. I went into like, I call it my monk halfway house. I went to the Cambridge Zen Center in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in Boston. And, I practiced with that tradition. There's a lot of lay folk there. And I lived there for a while as I started to take classes here and there. And then when I was ready to actually go to school and take the robes off, you do a little ceremony and you say like, you renounce the vows of the bhikkhu, which are like celibacy and, all these other things. And after you have to do that in front of a monk and in front of lay people, a monk who has the same vows. So I did that. And then, I took the robes off. And the next day, like I went to the beach with a girl, it was like,
Wow.
It was great. But, yeah, it was, both ways of living. I really respect.
Wow.
They're beautiful.
That's so cool. Wow. I just think it's such an interesting perspective and so fortunate that you were able to have that experience before going to school. Like you said, I mean, what was the biggest challenge as you were integrating, the science with the, you're right. Like the more like what we would consider like woo woo over here in the West. Where were the specific challenges there?
Well, I can use one specific meditation as an example. So in what's called the 32 parts of the body meditation, which you go through and you feel like your bones, your skin, you feel like the sinew, the oil, pus, blood, urine, all of that sort of thing. And you're doing this scan of sort of being mindful of the body, recognizing what are all the parts of the body. And as I was going through, I was like, well, this is the ulna, this is my humerus, these are phalanges, as I'm going through. And I'm like, there's not 32 parts of the body, there's hundreds of parts of the body, right? And the reason, that it's broken up in the wisdom tradition in a particular way is that's what you experience when you sit and close your eyes. That's where you have nerve endings that you can actually experience your body. They didn't have x-rays. They didn't have, autopsies where they, found the nerve systems throughout the body, way back when these meditation practices were beginning. You're just using your own perception. And you're accepting your own perception and the limitations of your own perception. Think about some people, I don't know if people are from a yoga tradition, they'll talk about chakras, like your crown chakra, your heart chakra, all that sort of thing. And when you sit in meditation, you might feel sensation around your heart. So from a wisdom tradition, they might call that energy. You might feel energy in your heart. From a scientific perspective, well, you have a nerve plexes around your heart. You have innervation of nerves. So there's sensation there. And I think some ways taking a wisdom approach and recognizing like, hey, I have a feeling, I'm going to accept this. I'm going to allow it. I'm going to be loving towards this feeling. And there might not be a label for it, but I'm just going to be present with it, is different than categorizing it. Oh, that's anxiety and that's a clinical diagnosis and we should give medication for that, right? Those are different approaches. And I think finding the balance for me of when is it helpful to take one side? When is it helpful to take another side? When I was I was a monk. I was actually living in Germany, and I had sort of differences with one of my first teachers. I didn't really approve of what he was doing, and I was trying to leave the monastery, but I didn't have an outside voice. Everybody who I knew was in the monastery, so I went to a therapist as a monk. Wow. So there I go with my shaved head, and this is in Germany too. So everybody's like very, it's like a traditional psychotherapy. And very Freudian. And so my shaved head, robe, I'm walking past like normal people as they come out from seeing the therapist. They're like gasping at me. And the therapist was incredibly helpful. I remember him saying to me, he said, "Bist du ein Muse?" which is, are you a mouse? He said in German, he said, "Are you a mouse? You run around the edges of the monastery, never walking through the center because you're afraid to confront the issues." Mm. Oh man, here's from the Buddhist perspective, oh, be peaceful, be kind, don't cause trouble, that sort of thing. But here is this approach, this Western approach, is like stand up for yourself, like own who you are and tell people how you're feeling and protect yourself, that sort of thing. And in that moment, that's what I needed. I needed that in order to free myself from suffering because I was in a sort of a toxic environment, an environment that had really become unhealthy for me. And it's that blend that happened within me that created well-being. And so once I got out from being a monk, I was like, I need to find a way to put these together in a really effective way to help other people and, start crossing the boundaries in the right way, taking the right pieces from psychotherapy and right pieces from this tradition and that tradition of meditation, and find something that's open for people, that people can really connect with, and that's simple. And one thing I really found, and that's why I created my company, Skillful Means, is where it starts to go wrong, I feel like in religious, institutions, and even in psychotherapy or culture, is when somebody else starts defining your well-being for you. They start defining what it means to thrive as an individual instead of you defining that for yourself. Instead of somebody supporting you to identify that for yourself. When they start saying, no, that's not well-being. This is what you should be doing. This is what it means to thrive as an individual. I think that's where we run into a problem. And when you find somebody who says, trust yourself, you can figure it out. Look within yourself, and they teach you tools to look and find out the answer for yourself. That's where you have the gold. And that happens, in the Eastern traditions and Western traditions. And I think you can bring those together in a really nice way. And for me, what I do in psychotherapy, working one-on-one with people, or in a group format with some of our courses, like the Skillful Means Program, we help people to define their own picture of well-being. What does it mean for you to thrive in the world? And then how do you use meditation, psychotherapy techniques to move in that direction? And how do you be a responsible and helpful community member to respect somebody else's picture of well-being is different than yours, and that's okay, and you're going to help support them move towards their picture, So that's something that I've become really passionate about, and that's sort of where my biggest obstacle, where I kept just trusting this teacher and trusting that teacher and trusting the text and feeling like I was getting betrayed. Where, I think it's kind of normal on the spiritual path for anybody to, when you don't know the woods you're in, you stick to the well-worn paths. But once you know the forest, you create your own path. And I think eventually I started to do that over time. And I started to let go of the feelings of betrayal and just recognize, like, hey, this is growing pains. This is a normal process to get to know myself and get to know which pieces of which practice are really going to apply to me and make sense and help me to realize my picture of well-being.
That is so well said. I love that. That's fantastic. Having grown up, in a religious background, it was definitely, spoken and unspoken that there was a certain order of doing things. And I spent, the first half of my life just checking off boxes and racing to the next thing and never appreciating where I was, because there was still so much that you had to do, and you had to do it with a certain person and all the, I can totally relate to that. I would love to talk about your program. It sounds like you have done such an amazing job taking so many different things from different areas and combining them and blending them in a way that, like you explained, is so simple. Before we do, though, I've heard you explain this before, and I think it's super helpful. Can you explain to the listener the difference between mindfulness and meditation?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think mindfulness is really our ability to be in our body and to get comfortable with our emotions, and to feel safety in our body, to feel safety with emotion, feel safety with feeling, to feel safety with our thoughts. And in doing that, we're developing acceptance for who we are. What feelings does this human being have? What needs does this human being have? You don't need to change anything. It's about being present with that in a moment. So mindfulness often happens in a moment. And then when you do sort of mindfulness over time, that's when you start to really get some effects from mindfulness. And to cultivate mindfulness, we use meditation. So mindfulness is sort of a state of mind where you're open, present, you're accepting, you're allowing, you're kind, you're connected with feeling. So it's not this sort of like detached perspective. It's you're connected, you're in the mix. And then meditation is the exercise of that, both the bringing about of meditation, what exercises, whether it's yoga, meditation, sitting in meditation, or like sitting meditation, walking meditation, or different perspectives, it's bringing about this state of mind again and again and again, familiarizing yourself with it, getting that muscle stronger so it's easier to get into mindfulness. It's easier to stay there for longer in this sort of open, accepting place. And then it's also, meditation is also the application of mindfulness. So it's using this mind that you create, this clear state where you're accepting and open. And then you use that to gain insight into areas of your life that are important to you. So usually I might be reactive in a particular relationship. And that's usually the mind that I have is sort of somebody says something mean to me and I react and I protect myself. And I'm used to doing that. Well, if you infuse mindfulness, you get into a mindful state, somebody says something, you'll notice here comes that urge to react. What happens if I just allow? You know, allow there to be feelings there. And then the urge passes, and wow, now you have an opportunity to respond differently in the moment. This is sort of the application of mindfulness. You realize, oh, I've been reacting to that urge my entire life. And that's why that relationship got destroyed. And that's why that relationship got destroyed. And that's why I lost that job. And then you realize there's a different way. I can respond differently. And I think that that's just a very simple piece. And I think this applies to all sorts of areas. And I think, again, coming back to my program, you know, we can start to identify areas of our life that are really important to us. And then we can start to apply mindfulness in those areas. And that's when meditation makes sense. It's not this, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to become enlightened and, you know, float on a cloud. It's practical in your daily life, things that mean something to you in the relationships that are important to you.
Mm. It's such a wonderful skill to have, to not be so reactive at people, to have them say or express themselves in a certain way and just sit with it. It's so important. It has improved all of my relationships so very much over the last year and a half that I've been very consistent meditating, you know, every single day. It's just to be able to be around and observe, and you feel that warmth in your heart sometimes or in your stomach, and it's just okay. Yeah. You can just be, you know, you can be the rock, or you can be the tree, you can be the energy that's taking it on, and it doesn't, you know, affect you. It's like Michael Singer says, it doesn't hit your stuff. It's not getting at your goat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about your program, the Skillful Means program. I would love to learn about that and the components that you brought in on that.
Yeah, sure. So the Skillful Means program is an online program and community. So we have sort of a video platform where we go through the different steps of cultivating and applying mindfulness and meditation. So, you know, we learn about the nervous system, we learn about the science behind meditation, what's happening to the brain. We learn from the sort of historical and religious sort of perspectives in context. So how did meditation get applied in Asia, in China, in Myanmar, in, you know, Japan in different ways? And I tell all sorts of Zen stories and that sort of thing. But we also go through cultivating these different meditations. So you learn samatha meditation, which is this sort of focused attention meditation. So the wisdom tradition calls it, you know, concentration meditation, or, you know, solidifying the mind. And from the scientific perspective, it's focused attention. And then we move to loving kindness meditation, compassion, gratitude, so cultivating positive affect. And a more positive perspective of mind, because evolutionarily, we learn about evolutionary psychology as well. We're much more likely to recognize a negative feeling, for that negative feeling to stick in our mind, to recognize what we don't have versus what we do have. And that's not just, you know, unpleasant, it's inaccurate. You know, we actually have more than we think that we have, but we're just 17 times more likely to recognize what we don't have than what we do have. 5 times more likely to recognize an unpleasant feeling than a pleasant feeling. And that's just for survival. And evolution set us up in that particular way to survive, not necessarily for happiness and peacefulness, right? So we go through understanding from a scientific perspective, and then we see how these Eastern traditions have been working on this problem for thousands of years already. And we also recognize, okay, here's where tradition comes in for a specific culture, and we can maybe let go of that, and specific culture, you know, develop this practice for issues that they were facing. And then we start to really look at your areas of well-being, the areas of your life that are really important. Now that we've cultivated mindfulness, we've cultivated loving kindness, we use this to clarify your picture of well-being. Use that mindful state to understand your relationships, understand your feelings, understand your career aspirations, and see it all more clearly, gain insight into those areas and plan it out effectively. And you're doing this as a group. So you're going through with people, you have accountability partners, and we have group meetings together, and you have all the videos and the workbook. And, it's had amazing results for people, people changing their lives, people developing these long-lasting relationships, developing their own meditation courses and classes out of it. Since we've gone through, we started to expand, and we have Chris Willard, who's another meditation teacher. He works with kids as well. He's written several books on mindfulness for children. He's running a course with us as well. And we have Pete Kadushin, who's the mental performance coach for the Chicago Blackhawks. He's doing one for athletes for us. So we have a bunch of things that are helping people. You can think of the SkillfulMeans program as a template to start thinking about the areas of your life where you'd like to apply meditation. And then my wife does mindfulness for the body. We have mindfulness for kids. We have for athletes, for creatives. Start to apply this to different areas with these different teachers. So we're really excited about the programs that are coming out. I think people are really changing their lives, developing really good friendships. And now, they asked me to start an ongoing group for sort of alumni. And now we have this awesome group that, we have 20, 30 people who are meeting on a regular basis, applying all this stuff to their lives. And, we're small, but we're growing, and it feels fantastic. I feel like I'm doing something good for the world. And that's ultimately all that matters.
Wow. Man, so many diverse programs that you offer. I love that. I love so much that you explained our evolution. It's really interesting to consider that software program has already been downloaded into us for generations. And you're right. It's if you're living in 2021, you can keep your house at the same temperature year round and order Grubhub and sit on your really comfortable couch and binge Schitt's Creek and Ted Lasso all night if you want. And it's just it's a question of comfort. It's amazing that we've created so much comfort, and we don't need to get hit by cyclones in Myanmar and all of those things. But that screws up the system and that's designed to protect us and save us. I really love that. I'm sure you get this pushback all the time. Like, okay, Dr. Jackson, you have, lived as a monk. You've been able to meditate 14 hours a day. Of course, you have an hour a day that you can be able to meditate. I am far too busy. I've got too many things going on. There's no way I could do that. What do you say to people who say they don't have time for meditation and for mindfulness?
Yeah, I don't think anybody comes to mindfulness and meditation because everything's going okay. I think they come because some things are not going okay. And if things are not going okay, something needs to change. And being able to make the commitment that you're going to start behaving in a new way, it's hard. You have to give something up. You have to give something up to create that space. But ultimately, one of the most powerful things about meditation is just making the space in your life for meditation. Not even the meditation itself. Even if you were just to say, hey, I'm going to meditate an hour every day, and instead you just laid on the floor and did nothing, I honestly think that it would help most people in our world who are overworked, overburdened, too busy, racing nonstop, pushing themselves. That's one piece. The other piece is you can start doing 1 minute of meditation. And that's fine. You can start with 1 minute, and after you do 1 minute, you'll be like, oh, this feels good. And then you might end up sitting for 3 minutes. And then as you do that on a regular basis, you realize, oh, this actually feels nice. I have a little safe spot in my day-to-day. Then all of a sudden you accidentally sit for 10 minutes. And now you start to get some effects of meditation. So I think, starting at a really small amount of meditation is fine. But if you look at the research, and you really want to get sort of the best bang for your buck in terms of time practicing. But the research shows, and I can rattle off the citations and that sort of thing, but with MBSR, Mindfulness Based Stress Reduction, and some people who researched it, what they found is, because this is one of the most sort of systematic sort of approaches of practice, it's been well researched, is that if you're able to meditate at least 3 or 4 times a week for about 3 to 4 weeks, for about 20 to 30 minutes a day, 4 times a week for 3 to 4 weeks, you'll start to notice the effects of mindfulness. So mindfulness isn't something that necessarily happens, the real effects aren't something that happens just the first time that you sit. So what I often do with people is, if I'm working one-on-one or in a group, the first 3 weeks are so important. And I'll try to do scaffolding, and I'll send them meditation recordings and workshop and all these sort of things. But if I can get them to do 4 weeks of meditation, then all of a sudden they come back and say, hey, I noticed something changed. I noticed I didn't respond in the usual way. I noticed that I felt the anxiety knot in my stomach, which I didn't even realize was a knot in my stomach, relax for the first time in my life. And then they're hooked, because it made a meaningful change, not because you're supposed to meditate and because it's supposed to be the good thing for you, it's because you've experienced the change. And as soon as they do that, then my job is much easier. But it's getting people to that point. So my whole thing, I have a fancy website, and I try to do all this marketing stuff and get people excited. It's just for the first 4 weeks. If we can get past the first 4 weeks, then we're together, right? Because you see the effects of it. And so that I would encourage people, if you can, for one time in your life, just 1 month in your life, you can meditate 30 minutes to an hour. I have all sorts of free meditations online. You can find me on Insight Timer. You can go to my website. You can sign up for one of my free, I'll give people a link to sign up for a free 7-day meditation challenge, which has a bunch of stuff in it. If you can, for once in your life, practice meditation 3 to 4 weeks, 30 minutes to an hour, you're gonna be surprised at what's possible. You're gonna notice a difference, and that is gonna be the motivation. And if you don't notice a difference, don't do it. It's not, if it's not helpful for you, if you don't want to try it, then don't do it. You don't have to do it. There's so many other ways to take care of yourself, and your picture of well-being can be totally different, and that's great. But if you want to try it, you want to really give it a go, even if you're skeptical, and I love skeptics who really give it a go, then give it a month.
Mm. That is such great advice. I love that. I think that's a really approachable and simple way to do it. It still requires a commitment, but it's doable. It's totally doable. Mm-hmm. And it's like you said, you're taking your own advice. You're not forcing people into, do my program. Go try any program. It's totally fine. And if it enhances your life, then that's great. That's amazing. I remember the first time that I tried to do nothing for 1 minute, and I did nothing for about 6 seconds and about 54 seconds playing on my phone. So just know that it might not be successful the first time, but that definitely does build over time. I think it's fantastic that you focus on groups. I think there can be a lot of power to working in groups along with, working individually with people. I'm just curious, yeah, exactly. I'm just, is there one, it doesn't have to be the biggest story, but maybe it can be something recent or something that makes you really proud. Do you have a favorite story from your groups?
Well, I can share a little tidbit, which I think is interesting. Often I lead walking meditation. So people will come to my meditation class, and everybody will sit down, get comfortable in their seats, and I'll say, okay, everybody stand up. And we'll do a walking meditation where everybody's walking in a different direction. I say, everybody walk in a different direction. And I want you to walk at your own pace, fast, slow, whatever it is, different direction. Within 5 minutes, every single time, maybe once in 15, 20 years of practicing or teaching meditation, but every time, within 5 minutes, people are walking in the same direction in a circle.
That's a Dead Poets Society. They do that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's so funny.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, Robin Williams has all the boys walk in the courtyard, and you're right, within like a minute or so, they're all marching in unison together.
Yes. So we really are herd animals, right? And we can use that to our benefit. or, we just fall into whatever sort of tribal politics sort of thing that we happen to identify with. But I think, we all identify with a different herd, so to speak. And we start acting and behaving according to the value set of the herd. And I think a lot of times we don't recognize that we've fallen into a herd, and that, what's good for the herd sometimes is in line with what's good for ourselves. But a lot of times it's not. And I think where mindfulness falls in is allows you to wake up for a moment and recognize, wait a second, how am I feeling? Is this actually helpful for me? What are my emotions? What are the thoughts? Is this actually producing well-being for me? Acting and behaving in the way that my corporation does, that my family does, that my friend group does. And I think that sort of is so valuable. And when you see other people respecting each other's sort of different perspective of well-being and really encouraging each other, man, that's love. That's real love. And I think that becomes a really beautiful moment when somebody who's so different from you can see in yourself, in your eyes, that this is what's really good for you, and they tell you to go get it, and they'll support you in that. Those moments, I'm getting choked up. Those are the things that I live for.
Man, I love that. Beautiful answer. This has been an awesome conversation. I, for one, have learned a ton. If you had to leave one simple tip to our listeners to take away from this conversation, what would that be?
I think ultimately, around the meditation practice, we're developing a way to be kind with ourselves and with other people. And I think that is the jewel of the meditation practice. And I think that's also where you can start. So, kindness.
Beautiful. I love it. Dr. Jackson, where can people go to find you and find your work and connect with you?
Yeah, so you can go to SkillfulMeans.life. And that's my website. You can find information about me, about how to work with me, about our different courses. And then, feel free also, if anybody wants to reach out, is it okay if I leave a link for you for people to have some free resources?
Of course, yeah, that's amazing. We would love that.
So I'll leave a link for people to do like our meditation challenge and some other things that have meditation recordings and, workbook stuff in there as well. So there would be videos and links to different articles and that sort of thing. So I can leave that.
That's amazing.
That's a way to start engaging with our process and then see if it fits for you.
That's amazing. We will definitely link to all of that in the notes. That's incredibly generous of you, and I know our listeners will appreciate that, and I will take you up on that as well. Your website is really well done. There's a lot of content there. I would highly encourage the listener to go and check it out. Dr. William Jackson, thank you so much for your incredible journey of life. I feel like you've lived like 6 or 7 of them at this point. But to have the desire to come back to a society that is, far less balanced, I would say, and far more complex, to be able to share your message is really incredible. So we're so grateful for you and your life and your work and the time you took today to be on our show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Casey. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It was an honor. And this has been another episode of Boundless Body Radio.